thanks very much for the opportunity to speak with you all. Can I just do some testing before we get going? I'd rather not use the mic that way when I sing and dance. It all lines up. So is that noisy enough for everyone? Yep. If it's too noisy and you're not interested, there's some seats that are not taken at the back. So I'll move this out of the way. Right, well look, again, thank you very much. My name's Greg Carlyon. I've been in this business of resource management planning for a bit over 20 years, and I see a lot of the people here that I've dealt with over those years, and it's a real pleasure. For others it might not be, but the whole purpose of the evening is to explore some issues which are dear to us all and share our various views. Now, Peter said we had to be out of here by 11, so I'm going to cut it as short as I possibly can. But I've got an awful lot to say. Now, I didn't intend to start with a photo of the man you all admire. But some people have said it over time that this is a narcissistic, self-involved bully. And it's not my place to say that. But what I did hear him say over the time that he was the mayor of this town, and really influential in regional politics, was that regional government was the home for the retired and those who have left government where it really matters, district councils, that it was a place for the self-interested, those who were potentially perhaps in industry or farming and going to benefit from decisions that they were going to make. He also said that there was little point in regional government, and I don't know what he would say now. He's a politician with Otago Regional Council doing a fabulous job there, I'm sure.
Not quite far.
Now, this is an amazing region to be part of. I'm really proud to have lived here and worked here for the vast part of my career and life. Obviously, it goes from the peaks of this dual world heritage area, the Maunga of Ruapehu, right down to Levin and Otaki. It's full of the most incredibly beautiful and picturesque places. It goes from coast to coast, east coast to west coast. Really diverse region, really diverse communities, and one of the challenges for the councillors that are in this room is matching up and working with all of those communities who perhaps don't hold hands on every plan because they just don't see the relationship. So if you're in Whangamomana, you don't have a lot of interest in what's happening in Akitio. So I'm going to do this talk in two parts really. The first is the little, Motuiti, and then I'm going to go Motuarahi, and the councillors here, they'll know that because that's on the front of the One Plan. And the whole purpose of the One Plan, oh, by the way, one other little thing, I didn't realise we had to talk about science tonight, but it's all science-based, what I'm saying. So I'm going to talk about something that's close to me and that drives me as an individual and as a member of a community. We live on a small farm in the Rangatiki. We are surrounded by our farming neighbours, and it's where our home is, where our kids are educated, and it's where we connect. It's called the Tutanui Stream, and it should be a magic little stream, and let me show you our way down there. This is the headwaters. It starts at a little spring, pops out of the ground, runs 365 days of the year. And this got fenced out just a couple of years ago, and the farmer that did it, David Smith, has got a number of QE2 blocks on his property. Absolutely stunning, and really strong opposition to paying for that fencing from the chairman of the regional council and chief executive. They couldn't see the logic of it. And all of these things I'm saying, you test with them in your own time. That wee spring feeds into, this is like Lake Wanaka here. Some people just think of them as the reservoirs in Martin, feeding the township its water supply, but to us they're pretty special. They're a neat place, and that spring I showed you comes in just from the top corner there and feeds the top dam and through the bottom dam and out to Martin Township. This is a wee stream that comes in across two farm properties. It's unfenced, and at the moment there's about 200 cattle mobs stocked in it. And that feeds that water supply. And I'm going to show you a picture in a minute. Just up here, the council started logging that on the very day that the government put out an instruction to councils, regional councils and district councils, that perhaps they should be more careful about water supplies and how they manage them. So we thought, as neighbours of this dam and this place that's special to us, that we would build a track around there and that we would attract our community to it. And by virtue of that, people would take a closer interest in their environment and respect it in the way that we obviously should do. It seems pretty logical, really. My 12-year-old Son learned how to chainsaw there. This is the feeder road to the dam after the District Council, with the Regional Council's support, started logging just, 6 weeks ago now. And this is how they left it, and if you went up there today, this is how you would find it. And this road, which a 50-tonne skidder was up and down for about 4 days before the logging was stopped, this is exactly how they left it when they walked off the site. And right where I'm standing taking this photo now, those two reservoirs I showed you, they are just here, right next to it. So we're feeding sediment and nutrients into that lake at a rate that simply can't stand. And so at the moment the District Council is wondering how it can address algal blooms in those lakes, and that would be a way. This is one of the other things that is going on in our stream. That's a hose that's been just randomly connected to a discharge of alum and water treatment plant waste just down the road on the Tutanui stream. It's pumped back up the road and then put into these dams. And that's been going for just on 3.5 years now. It's not consented, and it feeds that metal into that dam 24/7. And it was a council trial to look at whether alum could flock out the algal material that's sitting in that water and bring that sediment level down so that we didn't get the big algal blooms we get in there in summer. So that's been happening without consent for that entire period. It's acknowledged in the resource consent application to the Regional Council, and the Regional Council's just in the process right this minute of, I think, granting a consent for this exact activity. So when you get to the bottom of those dams that I showed you, this is the Tutanui stream. So it starts as a permanent free-flowing stream. Both the Mayor of Rangitikei District, Andy, and our Chair of the Regional Council, Bruce, both hold the view that that stream doesn't flow naturally, and it's like being in some sort of Monty Python trap to have our leadership saying to us, you actually need to prove to us that it's got flow in order for us to then manage it as if it should have flow. And that's what it looks like for 5 months of the year, that stream at that point. But there's some encouraging stuff happening. This concrete that's along the edge of the stream, that occurred as a result of, you never know when a few truckloads of curb and channeling are going to come free, and that you could work some magic with them. And this occurred with the support of the flood and drainage staff at Horizons Regional Council in order to stop this Hooker Falls-like stream from ripping out the banks. And we made some progress over the last year in that space. So that was prior to that concrete going down, and this is just in the last 2 weeks. And so the stream has now had all the concrete removed, the fence has gone on the side of the boundary, and we had 55 people out of the community planting 1,300 odd trees there, and it's fabulous to be part of a community that works on that basis. They were incredibly well supported by Regional Council staff. Those staff were magic. They really got it over the line, and they worked with our little community group, which is called the Tutanui Stream Care Society, which is made up of people who want to go and do things like this. They don't want to go to meetings, but they are very happy to jump the fence and hoik a spade into the ground. So this has been incredible, just seeing these little things happen. But I'm going to talk about that a bit further on as well. This was the first ever run of the Tutanui stream. These were my kids a year or two ago. They're bigger and uglier now though. But perhaps once or twice a year we get enough flow to do that. There are farmers down the length of the Tutanui stream doing incredible things, and this particular family have got a stunning block of bush. The Tutanui stream's running right through there, and they've fenced it on their own account. And about 50% of our landowners between Martin and the Tutanui reservoirs, which is about 9 k's, have now fenced their stream out, and we're seeing these conversations happening around the Tutanui stream and just how special it is. This is a section of the stream that the Regional Council's flood protection team have worked on over the past couple of years. The trees were pulled out of the bed of the stream. You can see the bed has destabilised. This work was done unconsented, and discussions with the Regional Council indicated that by way of mitigation they would look at fencing it so that we could then plant the entire stream, because the landowner on the true left-hand side of the stream, that's the side as you face down, he's fully fenced his side of the stream and is ready to plant, but he can't because the uncontrolled cattle access to the stream on his side means that we can't do anything pragmatic there. And then we get to a place that's pretty special to us. So we're in Martin Township now, and beautiful town, which we're all very proud of. And this archway was made adjacent to the Tootanui stream, and it's part funded by Forest and Bird, the walk, and Rotary and any number of other service organisations have put a huge amount of work in. So this is our Tootanui stream, and this is how I was until last week the chair of our Board of Trustees, and just up the road is our college of 300 students, and we talk to them about environment, and as they walk to school each day, that's what they see. So for 5 months of the year, they walk across this bridge and see no flow. The entire flow of the stream is diverted for our water supply, for our community, and it's left with no aquatic life and no ability to function. And it's a crying shame, really. And both the district and the region again are saying, well, consent for that doesn't expire till 2028, so why don't you come and talk to us closer to that time? But believe me, we're talking a lot sooner than that. And if you're ever thinking of going into the waste business, make sure you put Enviro first, because that's the secret to success in this space. That truck comes from Bonnie Glen, which will be the largest landfill in the North Island in a few years' time. And last summer it was supposed to cease taking the leachate from the landfill, bring it into town, into our town of Martin, plugging it into the sewer line, sending it to the sewage plant and into the Tootanui stream. Would have been a lot easier if they just put the pipe over the bank into the stream and discharged it directly. But they're doing the right thing here. And on a busy day in summer, they'll send 10 truckloads to that site and deposit them. And through winter, because God knows how hard it is to keep your leachate under control at your landfill, there's a whole lot more. And it goes to our Tootanui discharge site. I rushed through there, I'm so excited. And as we come down the Tootanui stream from Martin, so you've come about to that point where you saw the Enviro waste truck, you've come about 12 k's from the source of the stream. So in that time we've completely destroyed that water body, totally and utterly. It's got some chance as little trickles come in and it makes its way out of Martin, and this is the point at which we discharge our waste into it. So once we've taken the water out of it, we turn that water into something pretty special and put it straight on back. So at this point, there's almost no flow. I calculate something like a litre a second is happening at that point. And this is what's going into it, almost 24/7. So about 20 litres a second of waste from that sewage treatment plant, and it runs all year round, tens of thousands of cubic metres. And I'll just show you this one. We're going to come back and play a little game. People are a bit cold. This is just downstream of that plant. And so over this past few years, I spent, just by way of introduction, I spent nearly 10 years with DOC in the central North Island and 6 years with Horizons Regional Council. And they were times in my career where I've been really proud to be working with amazing people, many of still who are there, and many who are really constructive and helpful in providing feedback about what's happening with these sorts of places. So this is just downstream of that site. And so I had a look at the resource consent, which expires in 2019. There has been zero progress made to a new resource consent for that site. But fortunately, the Regional Council's been monitoring really closely once a year, and it is watching that site to make sure that it doesn't non-comply. And there's some councillors in the room who would have read the Environment Committee agenda in June, and they would have seen that the site was fully compliant. And they would have looked at that and gone, yep, that's what we'd kind of expect out of a sewage treatment plant discharging into a waterway. And of course they would have read the resource consent. So we're going to play amateur detective here, and I'd like you to put your hand in the air if you think these things are present in that water supply there. So this is the discharge running at 20 litres a second, just upstream, it's not dry at the moment, and this is the Tootanui stream running off down there. So the things the resource consent says are it shall not produce scum, foam or floatables. So hands in the air if you see any of those things in that picture. It says it shall not be unsuitable for farm animals. Hands in the air if you'd be happy to feed that to your farm animals, particularly your alpacas and your donkeys. Right. And it also says shall not have adverse effects on aquatic life. So hands in the air if you think that what you've seen on that journey is likely to have adverse effects on aquatic life. Okay. And I don't even need to show you the science that says that this breaches the ammonia levels for this site by 10 times. So life cannot exist downstream of this plant. So your regional council has said it's compliant. Well done, district council. And that's one of our big challenges, because it's easy to stand here and say these things. But I'm from a small town. We've got a decile 2-3 school. We've got families that can't put food on the table for their kids. And so our councils, on all of our behalf, make these decisions on all of our behalves. And what we're doing is it's the stupid leading the blind when a regional council tells a district council you're good to go. And we all go on our merry way when it's just unhelpful. It's like saying there's no poverty. We've cracked that. It's not helpful. And if we had an honest conversation in our community about the impacts of this discharge, then we could go to a different place. We would go, yes, we agree that that's the case. What are the options in front of us? But we assist NGOs, government agencies, councils all over the country in this space. And the first $2 million of every dispute is spent saying there's nothing to see here. And the last and most important bit is spent getting really good consents in place and getting these issues resolved. And then, of course, once I've been in rooms full of lawyers and planners who are all very well paid, we then give it to the sole person at the regional council charged with looking after 6,000 consents on a daily basis. And they have to make sure everyone's playing the game the way that they should. So now to the big. So that's a little one, and it's obvious, you know, I get a bit emotional. And funnily enough, the regional council group manager said just that recently when I showed one of these issues to him. But the thing that we all work under in this region that drives our resource management thinking is the One Plan. And it's got lots of bells and whistles, but it's supposed to do a few simple things. One of the people that was involved in determining that was in the room now. She did an absolutely staggering job under enormous pressure. But we had a focus on just the big 4 things that were important. So water quality, water quantity, biodiversity and sustainable hill country land use. So it means some things were left off. It was a case of saying there's not 230 important things. Each one of you will have something that's important. It meant the council and decision makers went, we're going to focus our energy and resources here. And that would be bloody magic if that had happened. The One Plan was supposed to reflect community desires, and there'll be people in this room that think that that plan has never reflected their values and desires, but is certainly built around delivering on the values that are identified in the plan. And that plan, so that you know that it's been robustly assessed, it got an independent hearing. This is after 4 years of consultation. Got an independent hearing with an ex-Principal Environment Court judge. It got an independent hearing at the Environment Court. It got an independent hearing at the High Court. And it just got another independent hearing again at the Environment Court this year. It's had lots of independent hearings for all of those that think they've had a rough deal. The idea is that you don't sweat the small stuff. So why would we worry and put obstacles in the way of a farm that wants to put a bridge across a stream to get stock out of it? Where previously the planning suites would put those sorts of barriers in place. They simply don't exist in that plan anymore. If someone is meeting the requirements in relation to a water take, for example, because the plan explicitly sets out how much water you can take until you get to the point that a river is drawn down and is not going to function, well, why wouldn't you just let them get to the counter, get that water and get out the door? And so that's the kind of foundation on which that's done. And if you're ever in the plan writing space and you're thinking this planning lark is a good way to make dosh and friends, never ever write a plan that provides clarity and certainty, because people will know what you mean, and you want to avoid that at all costs. I heard Boris, what's his face with the rough haircut today, just talking about how we were obviously killing all our beautiful little animals, our little pests, in the most humane way, and they'd all die with a smile on their face. Yeah. So there's some things that we did when we designed this plan up, and it's not too complicated. This could be like the science bit of this talk. We went and defined where it was that we were going to be managing. So you've got a zone in and around Wanganui, just down the road from me. We've got the coastal Rangatiki and the Rangatiki. So where we've got a geographically defined unit, we define that zone, and then we talk about its values. And that's really critical, because they're not just the values I want. They might be consumptive values like irrigation, the ability to discharge waste from a community like Martin, the ability for my children to swim in the Rangatiki River. And so those values were assigned to each one of those zones. So again, it's pretty clear, and then you're managing for that highest value. And we've had a lot of debates as a community about what's important to us, but at the end I'm going to talk about why I'm still positive in this space, and that's because water and environment are nearly at the top of the agenda, and we're talking about it all the time, generally in a pretty constructive place. But it's all very well to say, in the Rangatiki, I want to be able to swim, you know, and if you're a politician, you want to stop right there, because the next step is the hard bit. That's where you have to say, this is the standard we're going to apply to achieve that value. So the most fundamental value in the Resource Management Act, which is, I go to sleep with it just under my head each night, that most fundamental value is providing for life-supporting capacity. So hands in the air if you think that in the Tutanui stream, the Regional Council is ensuring life-supporting capacity is provided for. You're obviously not well qualified enough to make that judgment. But the last bit there is, what are we going to do about it? So having said that there's a standard, we're then talking about the methods to do that. And there's two methods to do that, only two. One's the carrot. You work with people, you subsidise their behaviour, you use economic instruments, you use education, and you get people over the line on that basis. So the planting we did in the Tutanui stream is a good example of that. Lots of the work that the Regional Council does is fantastic in that space. That's the carrot. And the stick is regulation. And I'm sorry to say that I think that regulation is required and that we're not doing it enough. And it's the thing that is needed to get us over the line at the scale that we have to make change. So while I was the first one there and helped do the organising and the planting of the 1,350 trees in the Tutanui stream, I know that unless we regulate those discharges out, put some water back in, take the sewage out, some of those sorts of things, exclude stock, then we are literally pissing into the wind. Yep. Now you might think that it's really complicated. This was the flow diagram for the one plan when we first did it. This is some more science for you. This is what was sitting behind it, and it was really complex. You know, it was the first time that we had all our Crown Research Institutes involved in research for the Regional Council, and it was such a pleasure to have these wonderful people with a lifetime of experience prepared to share that with an organisation who wanted to make change and didn't just want to hire them and then shut them down. And we kind of knew where we wanted to go because we'd talked about those values, but this bit here was the miracle happens here bit. And that required a whole lot of people and a whole lot of trust and faith in processes that we were trying out. And one of the things you will hear if you read the paper or look at the news or take an interest in this one plan thing, you'll hear it all the time. The plan is broken. The plan is broken, it doesn't work, and we need to do something new. At the very least, we need to change it. So what we're going to do is a science lesson. So I told you there was no science, I was tricking. Okay, so who can I have as a junior scientist? Who's the least sciencey person here? Someone with a beard. Thank you, sir.
I'm a scientist.
Oh, come on up. I just need you for a few seconds. This isn't going to be too painful, it'll take too long. So, if you're in the water quantity game, and you're thinking that managing water quantity looks like this, you couldn't be further from the truth. When we think about the catchments that we're responsible for managing, we've got a line in our minds which is developed through really good science, and once we get below that line, then we've reached the capacity of that stream to survive and provide for all the values that are in there. So if we could have you effectively allocate all the water out down to the line into that bowl, please. Don't spill it. You can spill it though.
No pressure.
Right.
Down to the line.
Yes. A little bit more.
Yeah, a little bit more.
Okay. And a little bit more. And a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Tiny bit more.
3 drops.
Thank you. That's great, Tar. That's been a great help, and that is how water allocation at the regional council is done. You can take a seat now. I'm going to get someone else for the more complex part of this equation. This really is how water allocation is done. In this region, the regional council did some staggeringly good work to work out what every stream and river could sustain in order to provide for the values in stream. And what was left was able to be allocated so that we provided for the needs of the community, needs of industry, and the needs of the environment. So people talk about this triple bottom line stuff. That's kind of a little bit like it, if it's even such a thing. So that's water allocation. So you're all policy people now. I saw Horizons is looking for planners on the interweb at the moment. Don't hesitate to apply. Now, I've got this one here. This is more complex. Could I have someone without a beard, please? Perhaps a woman scientist. There must be woman scientists in this room.
Yeah, without a beard.
Yes, thank you. Just pick amongst yourselves, or I'll certainly be picking.
Do you want to play now?
Yes, please. Come on down. Okay. So now we're doing management of contaminants into our water supplies. And you'd think, gosh, this is really complex, so let's have a go. This is spirulina, and I can tell you that this is the only thing you do with this stuff. So we're just gently pouring this in now. If we could just have this much here. Right, we'll stop there now. Most of our rivers in the region, if a typical catchment fitted into that glass, you know, they can assimilate so much pollution before they really start struggling. And there's only so much we can do. So we can take a bit more in there, we'll go halfway. This is a bit hard for someone who's probably worked on the Palmerston North discharge. But here we are in Palmerston North right now. That's a river that was subject to a consent review just a couple of years ago. And the point at which it got sticky, and the hearing committee said, this river is not sustaining life-supporting capacity. So we were getting algal blooms and contamination present in that river 8 kilometres downstream from that discharge into one of our biggest rivers. That's about where we're at with that. So we'll keep pouring, and if you could just keep pouring once we get over the top, just let it go over the top there.
I'm not playing for the kids.
Stop, stop. That's what Forest and Bird and Fish and Game would say. Keep going. Keep going. Pour it in. Let it go.
Yuck.
I think you could stop there. Thank you very much. And you now graduate as well. You don't need a job as a planner at the regional council. You've got a much better one in place. And this is Tararua district right now. So what we've done as a community is we have grossly over-allocated the contaminants into that catchment in a way that we are affecting life-supporting capacity and core values of that system. Any anglers in the room? Yep. Any of you fish the Mungatinoka? Yeah, it used to have partial water conservation order on it. That got subsumed in recent years. But that's a river that's declined in quality massively over this past 2 decades because of all the things that we put into it. We've got township discharges, we've got industrial discharges, and of course we've got dairy over there. And so we're in a real dilemma over there right now with the spirulina, if I knew it was spirulina in that river, in that we're at the point where we just simply can't allocate anymore. So if you remember our lesson on water quantity, it's no different for water quality, and we've got to the point that we've fully allocated the rights to some catchments. So in the Rangatiki catchment where I live, well, that's not the case. So things that, 2 more policy things just while we're here, because I can see you're all gripped by this. There's another tricky bit about dealing with water quantity and water quality. The first is how much do you give out to sustain the systems, which is what the Act requires regional councils to do. The second is who gets it, and that's the bit that we're all struggling with. So if I'm at the hearing for Ikitahuna and Paihiatua, we're talking about catchments that are fully allocated for nutrients, and there's not much space for them to come into. For the dairy industry over there, the Regional Council has recently allocated resource consents to low hundreds of dairy farmers in a way that leaves no room for anyone else to get anything. So it's at 2 or 3 times what the plan envisaged they might get, but it's way more than is available for either the catchment, future generations, or those other farmers that have been patiently waiting in line, running a really efficient system, doing what they should really do. Do you want me to speed up, or have we genuinely got all night? I'm having a great time. I'll keep going, I'm about halfway, is that alright?
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, when I was with the Regional Council, we did some really good work, and they're still doing some fantastic work in this space. But one of the things we've done as a country, and you know as much or better than me, that you know we sell ourselves into our international markets as a clean, green, wonderful place. In fact, this ocean farming thing, the Tallies notion, I just had a farmer say the other day, and the Regional Council's now got that farmer leading its team looking at how to manage feedlots. And that farmer said, why do we even worry about nutrient losses if they're going to the ocean? So we've pretty well finished buggering our rivers, we're having a damn good go at the land, but fortunately the ocean is big. So that's how we sell ourselves. We also sell ourselves like this, and this is the Tui Brewery in Mangatainoka, with the Tui girls there. And when I was working at the Regional Council, the Tui Brewery talked about starting a national park there, just because of the fauna that inhabits that part of the region. And I rang their marketing manager and said, you know what we could do would be way better than that. You could clean up the Mangatainoka River that runs past your factory where you put your heating water and other contaminants. And we could make it something we're really proud of that you know, represents reality. Well, he hung up, we don't communicate. So we sell that imagery, but this is really what we face. And this is an old slide now, this is from 2004. That's never going to happen again. We can just relax. It didn't happen in Cyclone Bola, hasn't happened subsequent to 2004. We're just not going to see it, so we can relax on that front. And that's the way in which we are managing that landscape right now. The Regional Council started a thing called the Sustainable Land Use Initiative, which federated farmers in this region opposed strongly. And they opposed it on the basis that it was some sort of effort to nationalise that private property and those property interests. And if I was going to be nationalising land, it wouldn't be this lot. These are beautiful landscapes at some times, but many hundreds of thousands of hectares were affected by that one single event that came in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time, and it will absolutely happen again. And it was going to be an $80 million program over a generation, and then it was going to follow in the generation after and the one after that. So the idea was that you can't make these changes overnight. The science, if you want some more science, one of the gurus at Ag Research said that to deal with these slip covers and the loss of sediment off those faces, you're looking at an 80-year recovery time. So that's 4 generations. So we thought, you know, a lot of money over a long period of time. The Regional Council has progressively cut that budget and has stopped producing farm plans at any scale. The idea was that you needed to do 500 whole farm plans over the first 10 years, and largely in the Manawatu catchment. Not to leave you guys out, the Paraparas is clearly a site that's you know, got a lot of focus on it, but you have to do a lot of work in one place and really focus to make a difference. Just spreading it out over those you know in the low-hanging fruit at the regional scale and at the large catchment scale doesn't make a difference. It does on individual properties, and there are some farm plans out there that individual landowners can be enormously proud of, that they're fully implemented. This is a stream next to a bypass. This is an older photo, but I've seen 2 sites like this in the last 12 months where cattle are being run in underpasses next to streams where there's a direct crossover between the two. this is a feed pad. So some people in this room will tell you that this is mob stocking, and yes, part of it is. So if you've got cattle feeding along the line of some sort of crop, then you'd call it mob stocking. But where you bring your material into the site and you import it, then you're running a feed pad. It needs a resource consent, and the regional council says the response to what we provided them, which was a professional planning opinion and 30 photos of feed pads like this on the Rangatiki River, was emotional, but it would have a look at the issue. And it then sat down with the farmers who have feed pads in this region and said, we need to work together to make sure we sort this issue out, and that's where they are now. And I got a letter on that kind of basis just today from the Regional Council, actually. This one here, this is a tragedy. This is, who's been on the Napier Taihape Road before? One of the most beautiful drives in the country. You get up onto that Ngāmatea country and you can see right across to Ruapehu, right down the stunning Rangatiki Valley, and this is the Rangatiki River. It's got one of New Zealand's 15 water conservation orders on it. So if you think about our national parks, of which there's a similar number, this is one of the 15 most special rivers in New Zealand.
And snow.
Sorry?
And snow.
Yes. And the rivers, you drive down a big face here, you cross the bridge over here, and then drive over there and head off to Napier. Don't know what people do once they get there. But this feed pad has been running with one of the largest farming companies in New Zealand on the side of that river for many, many years. I don't know if it's operating today, but next week when you ask me, I will know, because we'll be flying it over the next wee while to revalidate who's changing their behaviours in this space. The fence that runs along the side of this feed pad used to sit a little bit further back this way, but the Regional Council provided subsidy for the fencing and it moved closer to the river. These are the sorts of things that happen periodically. This is sloppy, piss-poor behaviour, but they do happen. This is what happens when people get in a lot of trouble, can't manage their system, and are likely on a dairy farm like this to be running into problems not just with the environment but with their budgets and a whole lot of other things. And so it requires people who enter those properties and who work with those properties to be sensitive and thoughtful and careful. So I looked after a team like that, but you can imagine I probably wasn't the guy to go and do those visits. And then this is just as valid today as it was back in 2009-10 when the Cawthron Institute produced a bit of work which was misinterpreted to say that the Manawatu River was the worst in the Western world. It was just the worst in the very large sample that Cawthron had. This was one of Tom Scott's cartoons at the time. I think it was Scott, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's just as valid today. We're still asking these exact same questions now about how could this be happening? Where could it be coming from? I really cannot work it out. And yet, when we explore these systems, we know exactly where it's coming from. We know there's 27 point source discharges to the Manawatu catchment. Sorry to keep talking about that catchment, this one is way better. It's just one I know. We know there are 500 and something dairy farms on there. We know there are exactly what is happening with land use there and what the challenges are. So these questions have been asked and answered over and over. The bit that we're missing is the decision about what we're going to do. And that's not easy, and it's not fair to think that it is easy. So what is the science telling us? These are some people that I worked with when I was back at Horizons. They don't all look that geeky, and 2 of them still work with me today, and the other 2 are in a similar sort of space, and we work together very regularly. So it's a very small community of scientists in this country. They're not all wearing those thick glasses, and he'd have a beard now because that's much more hip. But it is a small community, and it makes it really tough. If you work in an environment where you're under pressure, we used to have Mike Joy. Now, who hates Mike Joy in this room? I find him tedious. But I used to go up to Massey and give Mike assholes, because when I worked at the Regional Council, he would talk about the fact that we were bought and paid for, we couldn't do independent science, that we were locked up, and I really did not like that, and still probably, you can tell I don't like being told what to do. But I think there was a measure of truth in that. It's very hard for decision makers to keep their hands off really good science staff who are doing really good science and providing that to decision makers. So I used to meet regularly with my counterparts around the country, and we go, you know what, we want to be science led. and more so, we want to be evidence-based in our decision making. And then we would get the evidence and the science, and we would go, what are those goddamn scientists doing? We need to shut them down. They've got too big for their boots, and we need to make some pragmatic decisions about where to from here. And that's kind of the space that we're sitting in right now. So we have a government that talks about evidence-based decision making, and we all practice political expediency to some degree. So what's the national position on the science? Well, fortunately, if you're an avid reader, this year you would have read the report from the OECD. The Ministry for the Environment and the Stats Department is their first report against the environmental reporting legislation that came in, 2 years ago. The Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor, Gluckman, and the PCE, who's done 2 reports on freshwater in the last 2 years, and they say exactly the same thing. So they're all wrong. When they say it, they say that our freshwater resource is under severe stress. Not just a little bit of stress, it's under severe stress. That's their word. They say that freshwater is degraded adjacent to intensive land use. So again, if you look at any of the water quality science, some of which the Regional Council is espousing in this region, where they say it's actually pretty good. Well, yeah, if you're a tramper like me, it is pretty good, and you'll get to some places where you can drink it safely. But if you live on our lowland country and you are discharging waste from your house, or you've got a dairy farm which is discharging waste onto the land, then you're a contributor to the impacts that are occurring on all of our intensively used lowland catchments. You think about a region like this, we hear people talk about wetlands being the lungs of our environment. Well, in our region, we're down to less than 1.5% of original wetland cover. So that's where we've got to. And I still hear politicians and regional councils saying, I just flew over it, there's tons of it. And that's good enough to make key decisions when our science community would say otherwise. They, not me, but I agree, say that dairying is a key driver of water quality decline. There is just no question about that. The evidence is in, and it's unfortunate because there are any number of outstanding dairy cockies doing a great job on their properties, but when we collectively add up all the things that we're putting into our environment, the system just simply can't cope, and that's a real challenge. And we've got a number of dairy farming clients who are wrestling with this issue right now. So one of the things the Regional Council is currently telling dairy farmers in this region, because they have had to put a pause on granting consents, is that the plan is broken. And they are saying that with another few weeks to think about it, they'll get a solution. And I think they need to come and do this. I could do this class for those staff, because it's as simple as that. I wanted to use it somewhere in this talk. I used to have a boss when I was a doc that said, Greg, you can't make toffee out of dog shit, mate. And that's kind of where we're at with the way in which we've allocated nutrients over the last wee while. We've basically given out all the rights to the people that came through the door and said, this is how much I want. And that's really quite troubling. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. The last thing is, it comes back to that planting on the Tootanui stream. So the task of restoration is immense, and the scientists at the Regional Council who are there right now, when we were doing the plan, they said we were looking at 200 years to stabilise our existing water quality decline. So the numbers are huge, and they're over a long period of time. And so these fantasies we get into where we go, you know what, we finally made the one plan operative just 12, 15 months ago, water quality is already improving. It is a fantasy, and it's not supported by any evidence, and there's nothing in the system that will support those statements from staff, politicians, or anyone. So the challenge is really quite huge, but the nice thing is, it's totally doable, and I'm very confident about that. So in our local, it might be a bit hard to see that. I got really excited here. I've only got 45 slides left, so we're nearly there. Horizons Regional Council convened a workshop just 2 years ago and invited independent scientists from throughout the region. I think someone in this room was there. Was he there? Just nod if he was there. Or was it Russell Death that convened that? Yeah. So out of that workshop, if you want to have a look, this is the work of the Manawatu River Accord. So it meets with affected and interested stakeholders to try and reconcile challenges. But it also, in this case, said, well, this, just talking about science and making science decisions and recommendations is not a job for every person, it's a job for scientists, and we've stopped respecting scientists for that contribution that they make. We think anyone can do it. Anyone can do planning, but not anyone can do science. And that group came back and said, there's no significant change. There are some useful emerging trends, and there's some positive directions, but in general, in this region, at best things are stationary. And I actually think that's a pretty good place to be, because in a lot of the country, we're in a dreadful situation and things are in decline. But the Chief Executive of Horizons, he says regularly in the media that water quality is improving. Why did we need to go to the Environment Court with these people from Auckland when water quality is improving? It's fantastic, it's getting better, things are good, and we're working with the community. All good sentiments. But then when it came to the Environment Court, which was an opportunity for the Regional Council to front in, I think, March of this year, put some expertise in front of an independent judiciary and go, things are improving. Here's where they're improving, and here's where we've still got some challenges. I think you can take your foot off our throat for 5 seconds, please, and let us get on with the community. It didn't do that. It didn't send a single expert into that forum to represent the interests of the community or the council, and simply because there is no evidence to support that. So, who has heard of this amazing thing called the One Plan? Hands up again? Oh yeah. Well, anyway, it's not that amazing, and it's just a regulatory document. It's just a way of codifying the way that we're going to behave in this region. And after an attempt by particularly the farming lobby through the Environment Court and the High Court to derail the One Plan, they came up with a new strategy, and that's Dairy NZ. And their strategy was just simply work so close with the Regional Council that you can hardly tell the difference between them. And that's obvious when you get a resource consent from Horizons Regional Council for a dairy discharge, and in one corner is the Horizons logo, and in the other corner is the Dairy NZ logo. And so that's a regulatory agency discharging its duties, hand in glove with a really key, critical, important, and generally independent agency in this country. And that makes it really hard to do your business if you have a contra view when they do what they did through that period. So effectively what that court case was about was, I'm just going to go one slide ahead and make sure I haven't, oh no, I'm going to get the districts at assholes in a minute, so don't worry if you're dairy. Effectively what that court case was about just a few weeks ago, and I hope the councillors that are here have read the decision, because it makes for a good read and an honest assessment of what is going on. It was an attempt by Fish and Game, who have spent in excess of $1 million, and the Environmental Defence Society. It was their attempt to get the Regional Council to simply lawfully implement the plan they are supposed to implement. And there's any number of ways to do it differently. Change the plan, amend it, do any number of things that the law provides for, but don't just ignore it, which is exactly what the region did. And it was really unfortunate, I think, for the expert staff at the Regional Council that they weren't in front of the Environment Court to explain their positions, to explain, I talked before about how hard it is to be a scientist, but it's also bloody hard to be a planner. And it's really hard to be a planner because we're not paid enough, but it's also hard to be a planner when your Regional Council writes a resolution in the public domain that says you will grant every resource consent that comes over your desk. How can you conceivably operate with any integrity and feel that you've got the protection of your organisation if your councillors are doing that to you on a daily basis? It is impossible, and I think those staff are in an invidious position. And Sir Geoffrey Palmer, well, we all know he's biased. What would he know? He was a Prime Minister, he's a legal guru, he spent his whole life in constitutional law, and he said the illegality of the Council's decision making is quite stunning. He also said, so complete was the Council's forensic defeat, and he went on to explain why. And then he said, we must now be approaching the point of misfeasance in public office. And he said that that's something he has never contemplated saying in writing in any other situation in his long legal career. And that is where Horizons has got itself in the last wee while. And that hole must be very, very deep and very, very dark. And so that's the one plan case, and the regional council now can't grant consents in that space till it complies with the law. And the judge had to keep saying in his decision, for the benefit of the reader, it's like this. Ordinarily in a decision you wouldn't do that. You'd just go, these people get good legal advice, they've got great staff. But this particular judge and his two commissioners had to say, no, it's like this. Here's the words you're going to use and here's the way you're going to operate, which is really quite unfortunate. And then we get around our districts, and these aren't the most beautiful towns in the region. That's not why they're on this list. These are towns that are on this list because every one of them is seriously non-compliant with this discharge from its town water supplies. And some you know, and some you live in, and they are all got challenges. So I talked before about the expense of putting a decent scheme in. What does it cost to put a decent sewage scheme in a town like Whanganui?
42 million.
30 or 40 million? Yeah, Michael Laws, it's 100 million. But yeah, it's tens of millions of dollars. In a little tiny town, we haven't put it on here, they're not non-compliant yet. Little tiny town like Fielding, they spent the thick end of 20 million. It's not a cheap business to be in, to put in state-of-the-art modern sewage systems. In Whakapapa, this is the one, of course, Palmerston North City, that is continuing to operate through until at least 2020 with the support of the Regional Council, with an effect on life supporting capacity, contrary to the Resource Management Act. This one here, Whakapapa, it's in a World Heritage Area, a dual World Heritage Area. There's only 29 of them on the whole planet. And the Department of Conservation over many years has tried to discharge to land within Whakapapa village. It's not worked, and it's gone over the side into the wee stream. So they're just short-circuiting that, and at the moment they've got a resource consent with the Regional Council, which they accepted and has been notified to discharge that treated wastewater into that stream, which is a natural state stream in a World Heritage Area, about to be handed back to the iwi to manage for all time as a consequence of their treaty claims against the Crown and its management of these sites. So this is a list of real challenges for us as a community, and some have come off that list in the last few years, but not many, and it's hard to imagine that any of those will come off there soon. For towns like Taihape, Hunterville, that was a really interesting one. It's a little tiny town. Our kids went to school in Hunterville, so they're contributors to the impact on the Polariwa stream. And they got a new resource consent for that discharge to the Polariwa stream, which feeds into the Rangatiki, so it's a tributary. And I can't remember the number, but whatever the number was, from day one of that consent being granted, following an Environment Court appeal and hearing, the District Council has doubled that discharge. And they have simply said, in our application, in the hearing, and then at the Environment Court, we had to re-represent these issues, we just got the numbers transposed the wrong way. And so the fact that we're putting double in is actually what we intended to right through that process. And so that's the quality of the assessment that's going in. But worse is that for most of those, they're lucky if they get looked at by a Regional Council officer once or twice a year. And if it's the one in my town, in Martin, it's fine. So I don't know what they are for the others. We've got a passing interest in some of those others. Nearly there. I think this is the critical bit of the discussion that we might have tonight, and that is that we're past the time where we can have win-win-win for everyone. And that, you know, I even had discussions with Russell Norman a few years ago where he was going, no, we can have win-win-wins in this space, but that's not the case. For the last few decades, we've simply been externalising our losses onto the environment, and we've just been pumping those losses into the environment, hoping that someone else will pick up the tab, and it's someone that generally doesn't have a voice. And you'd think that voice for those losses would be the Regional Council. It seems so logical, partly because the law says it, partly because the expertise is present there, partly because we pay rates for that purpose. So there's a whole lot of good reasons why they would be our Lorax, and they would do that on our behalf. And we wouldn't have to go into hearing after hearing with tangata whenua and other community groups for those people to spend their time and energy unrecovered in order to ask the regional council to please do its job. And that's the hardest thing for a politician. These are words that politicians do not like, particularly losers in an election year. It's not the place that you want to be. And that's the place that we have been for some time, but are ignoring it. So, I think that that's the challenge for us to front up to, and to encourage our decision makers to front in honesty. This one here is because all those other slides were so demoralising. How are we ever going to get out of here? It's sickening. But the reality is that I'm in this space because with my kids and my friends and family and all my workmates, whenever we've got spare time, we end up on rivers like this. And this is the Ngāraroto River. And if you are users of the Kaimanawas and Kāweka Ranges, which is where I was brought up, there's already 2 water conservation orders. We've got the Mohaka and we've got the Rangatiki River, and the Ngāraroto makes 3. Now, it's an incredible river. You can raft on here for 5 days in wild water, not see another person, slay some trout, bloody pest fish, and be with friends and family. You can do that on the Rangatiki and any number of other rivers we've been on in New Zealand. And so, it gives you some serious hope that these things are going in the right direction. It's really intriguing that for the Ngāraroto River in Hawke's Bay, which has got the largest number of co-applicants in the history of any water conservation order. There's 5 there, including the first ever iwi group. We've got jet boaters and forest and bird together, and wherever we go anywhere, people who are opposing it, generally people who need irrigation water, they say, oh, how can they work together? How can those jet boaters and those forest and birders be together in the same tent? Supporting this, supporting this notion. But it's amazing what people can do when they have shared values, as these groups do. Anyway, long story short, in Hawke's Bay region, the regional council has opposed this from day one. They have rallied the agriculture sector and anyone else that they could muster to oppose the notion that the community might say rivers like the Ngāraroto, from source to sea, so it starts not far from Taupo, ends up at Clive, is an outstanding water body, and it should be protected in perpetuity on that basis. And we look forward to being at the hearing in a few months. That's one of the things that, it makes it a good day when practitioners have to come into a hearing and say, actually that's not that good. It's not as good as you think it is. It's not an outstanding landscape. It's not outstanding water quality. It's not outstanding volume. Doesn't provide an outstanding experience. It's not important to iwi. There are the days that you need to get paid $500 as a lawyer to front those kinds of opinions and views. So it's a real pleasure for us to work in this space with these kinds of people. When we went down this river last year, we run a trip each year just to remind people what's happening on the Ngāraroto, and we get 50 or 60 of all sorts down there. First thing that happens is all our rafting community offers up rafts, vehicles, lays it all on, because this is the place they want to show off. For the Rangatiki River, I'm nearly stopped, nearly worn out. For the Rangatiki River, you don't have to be above Springvale to get that experience. You can be at Brian McGall's place at River Valley. The only difficulty is that he's got 3 feed pads above his property, and at times the river runs, pea soup brown muck because of that material flushing in. He's a bit emotional, I have to say. But right through there, all the way down as far as Oaniti, that river offers an incredible opportunity, just as the lower reaches of the Whanganui do. We get off the beaten road and we find these gems, and we haven't munted them, and it reminds us that for the lower parts of these rivers, if we get stuck in, hold our decision makers accountable and work alongside them if they'll have it, we could make huge improvements over this next generation or so in these places. I'm going to finish with just one little thing. We were at a hearing the other day for the Live-In landfill, and there's a little marae next to the Hokio stream, and that marae, Pariraukaua, it used to have a piggery against it, but luckily it's not now. That closed down when it went broke. and then they built the landfill in its place. And that landfill has been illegally discharging into the Hokio stream without a resource consent for its life. It's been the subject of 2 Parliamentary Commissioners' inquiries and 3 consent reviews. And when I was in that hearing last week, convened by the Environment Court, I'm not speaking out of school here, we're talking about generalities. One of the lawyers who was representing a party said, well, I'm really lucky on this because I don't come with any baggage. I'm fresh to it, just picked up the file a couple of days ago. I'm fresh to it, and I can look at it with only the eyes that a newbie can. And you think, well, that's a good place to be. And one of the people that we're working with said, well, he also said, can we please be out of here by 3:30? You know, stuff to do, places to go. And the chap was sitting next to me said, well, I'm pleased that you're here because I've been involved in this issue for 70 years. And my son, who's sitting next to me, Pātaka, who you know, I promised him he would never have to get involved in this leachate from this landfill tipping into our stream so that we can't provide kai to people who are having tangi on our marae. But he's had to get involved. But the thing he's promised is his daughter, who was sitting next to him, that she would never have to get involved. And the likelihood is quite high. She's going to spend a good part of her time. And I think that it kind of, all of us that are in this space, particularly in the professional space, we have to remember what those people are bringing to the table, their experiences, and acknowledge them. And it's easy to pass them off as lay people or as a bit nutty, a bit over emotional, not experienced enough, but they bring generations of experience to the table which we need to listen to, because a lot of them have got the answers to some of these challenges here. Pretty easy really, who'd be a councillor? Thank you very much.